Greetings and welcome to the IFN's Science Innovation Showcase, where we're looking to share with all of you science innovations that are going on across our entire food and beverage ecosystem. My name is Gwendolyn Jones, and I am the Executive Director here at IFN's. For those of you who are not familiar with us, IFN's, or the Institute for the Advancement of Food and Nutrition Sciences, mobilizes our membership from government, industry, and academia to drive, fund, and lead actionable research. As our name implies, we are focused on food safety and nutritional sciences, all to advance public health. We catalyze the creation of scientific knowledge by funding external researchers. And additionally, we catalyze the creation of scientific knowledge by convening experts. All of this is done to drive positive change for everyone. As we get going this morning, want to quickly turn the presentation over to Dr. Andrew Maynard. Andrew, let's have you join us on screen. And from there, we can have you provide some comments. Andrew is a full professor and associate dean at the Arizona State College of Global Futures. Additionally, I'm very proud to note that he is co-chair of the IFN's Board of Trustees. Andrew.
Great, thank you so much, Gwendolyn. It's great to be here. So for those of you that are used to being on Zoom meetings with me, you'll realize that I'm in rather sparse conditions at the moment in the office. There is a reason for this, and the reason is that ASU's College of Global Futures is right now in the process of moving to a brand new $200 million building. And I mention this for two reasons, because it might seem a little bit off-piste. The first is that ASU has actually been recognized as the #1 college for innovation for the past 7 years running. And it's been recognized in that position because the university has embraced the idea that in order to build a more vibrant and promise-filled future, we have to transcend conventional barriers between disciplines and sectors. And that's the basis of this brand new College of Global Futures. But there's a second reason why I bring it up, and that is we also recognize the need to bring together thinkers and doers in unconventional ways. And that is why we're actually creating a physical space to do this. So both of these are true for a public university like ASU if we really want to thrive and build a better future, but they're equally true to the landscape around food and nutrition, which is where I want to make that connection. However you look at things, we live in a world where the future is being created before our very eyes at breakneck speed. And as we adapt and ride the wave, we can't rely anymore on old partnerships, old institutions, and old ways of doing things. So this is where it's incredibly important that we put on our entrepreneurial mindset and embrace innovation. But as the new comes in and innovation fuels our ability to thrive, even as the world around changes, there is one thing which remains constant. And that is, we need the best possible science to make the best possible decisions for the best possible futures. And we can't do this on our own. So this is precisely why IFN's draws on and integrates expertise across business, government, and academia. And it's precisely why this event exists as we build new relationships and perspectives to ride this wave into the future. So just as I close these remarks, you'll have probably guessed by this point, and if you haven't, you'll cotton on to this pretty fast, that this is not a traditional pitch event. And of course, there are multiple places you can go to get pitches on the latest science and technology and what businesses are trying to do to get your money so that they can thrive. But we wanted this to be a showcase to celebrate creativity and community by bringing together different communities, different stakeholders that are working together to build a better future around food and nutrition. So as you begin to sort of go into this showcase, I'm rather pleased, in fact, very pleased to see that we actually have a diversity of speakers from government, industry, and universities. If you want to look at the percentages, I think they break down at something like 22% of our speakers are from government, 40% are from industry, and 38% are from academia. And we have a similar sort of split in the audience. So I would say, as you embrace this multi-sectoral environment and get a taste of what's coming down the pike with food and nutrition research and innovation, and especially as you geek out on the science innovation that we see here, I really hope that you're inspired by new ideas, new perspectives, and new connections. And I especially hope that you find that, just like this office, you have a chance to clear out the old and embrace the new as we go forward. Thank you, and back to you, Wendelin.
Great, thanks so much, Andrew. Appreciate your squeezing this in. I know it's a very busy time for you. And in fact, it's a very busy time for all of our audience as well, as we're coming up on the end of the year. So want to take a moment and talk just a little bit more about IFNs and who we are. And with this, we're going to be queuing up our introductory video that we want to share that really does explain further how we as a nonprofit organization are advancing public health and bringing together our tripartite membership. So please.
Today's public health challenges are vast. The food safety landscape is rapidly evolving, and confusion around nutrition is greater than ever. Consumers are more engaged in holistically managing their health, which has important implications for the food and beverage ecosystem. Science can meet these challenges to deliver a positive impact. We believe food safety and nutritional sciences are crucial tools in supporting the evolving needs of public health, and we must evolve to meet these challenges. The Institute for the Advancement of Food and Nutrition Sciences, or IFNS, drives research and convenes scientists to catalyze evidence-based action that benefit the entire food and beverage landscape to improve public health. Our members and research partners value scientific integrity above all else. We are uniquely positioned to mobilize industry, government, and academia to drive, fund, and lead actionable research and elevate food safety and nutrition sciences to advance public health. Our research helps industry make informed, independent decisions that has a positive impact. Our government stakeholders use our research to make informed decisions that impact policies. And our academic partners use our research to outline additional efforts that will improve food safety, food production, and nutrition science. We believe that collaboration and inclusion of diverse perspectives is crucial to strong, evidence-based science that benefits the entire food and beverage ecosystem. Together, we can meet the evolving needs of today's consumers, support our shared ecosystem, and deliver positive change for the betterment of public health.
So with that great video starting to show how we bring together the diverse perspectives and the benefits for government, the benefits for industry, the benefits for academia, and the benefits for society as a whole. As we continue our introductory remarks, I wanted to circle back to some of what Dr. Andrew Maynard shared with us, and that is that it is the inclusion of diverse perspectives that is crucial to credible science that benefits all of us. Andrew mentioned these statistics with the nice balancing of representation from both public sector scientists in academia and government with private sector scientists. We've got today and tomorrow speakers from large, well-established brands as well as independent new brands. We've got speakers from some universities that we have established track records of collaborating with, and we have speakers from universities that we've never interacted with. We have some new speakers from government that we've only rarely interacted with, as well as some established. We're just in a case where when we think about that diversity perspective, we want to really be inclusive and be expanding. We do all of this based upon our 4 core values: scientific integrity, transparency, collaboration, and public benefit. We use these 4 core values to drive forward, making connections that matter, supporting collaborations that matter, and catalyzing science that matters. So with that as the introduction, one last thing to cover is how can all of you who are attending today ask questions, right? We want to make this a bit of a dialogue. And at times even we're going to genuinely have some really open dialogue sessions, but we want to ask all of you to connect with us, right? Engage with us by typing in questions. So as this slide shows, on the top of your control panel, you've got a little orangish red arrow. You can use that orange red arrow to expand or collapse the size. Additionally, under there, you also have what is a questions box, okay? That questions box is where you can type comments or questions to the presenters. The only folks who see those questions are actually IFAN staff, so no need to worry about somebody else seeing it. But rather what we'll do is after you type and enter the question, after each presenter, throughout our entire showcase event today and tomorrow, there'll be opportunities for folks to ask questions. Additionally, want to highlight that note on the bottom, which is that we have included 3 attachments within the system. So if you go in there, what you'll find is a 2-page schedule at a glance that does allow for folks, if they want to go, gee, I need to step out for this other meeting, or gee, I want to make sure I really listen in on this. You've got a quick schedule at a glance that covers our time today and tomorrow. Additionally, we have a multi-page detailed agenda available for download as an attachment as well. And then the last attachment that we have in the system is a front back brochure on IFANs, right? As an innovation showcase where we are purposefully looking to bring together new diverse viewpoints, we want to make sure that everyone, and this is with our attendees as well as our presenters, have an opportunity to learn more about who we are and what we do. With that, it is my pleasure to introduce Dr. Mary Ditto. Mary Ditto received her PhD in molecular biology and cell biology from the University of Chicago. She completed postdoctoral studies at NIH and also at the Center for Biologics. Currently, Mary is director of the Division of Science and Technology at CFSAN, Center for Food Safety and Applied Nutrition at FDA. Within her roles and her career at FDA, she's been involved in a number of very interesting, very timely topics, to include food additives, grass ingredients, and genetically engineered plants. So with that, Mary, let's have you join us by phone while I switch out the presentation. So, Mary, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Gwendolyn, and thank you for inviting me to speak today. And I want to start by presenting on the next slide and a presentation outline of what I'm going to be covering today, which is a brief overview of the Food and Drug Administration and CFSAN, Center for Food Safety and Applied Nutrition, which is where I am. And then I'm going to delve into the authorities that we have under the Federal Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act, which gives the agency the authority to carry out its responsibilities. I'll talk about food additives and grass ingredients, and then I will address, how FDA is dealing with innovations in food productions and in the food supply. If on the next slide, you will see a very crowded slide that you cannot possibly read, but I just put it up because I just wanted you to get a sense of, FDA is a big organization. We're a big organization because FDA has been charged to regulate an enormous part of U.S. consumer goods. 20 cents for every dollar spent on consumer goods is a product that's regulated by FDA. And we have a very broad mandate to protect the public health. The next slide is a little more readable. It's what I call my abridged version, and I'm going to I'm going to discuss the centers that we have that oversee safety and efficacy of drugs, biologics, which is vaccines. They've been very busy. Center for Devices and Radiological Health, CFSAN, where we take care of foods. Center for Tobacco Products, which has oversight for tobacco products and also a mission to reduce tobacco use by minors. And the Center for Veterinary Medicine, which has authority for reviewing veterinary drugs, but also looking at food for animals. I've got the Office of Regulatory Affairs highlighted. There are field offices. They are the people who have the boots on the ground to do the enforcement, compliance, inspections. They really work with state, local, tribal, and territorial officials. It's an enormous job. If you count the number of FDA registered facilities, domestic and foreign, there are over 300,000 facilities. This is not a job where you're going to go into every facility every year, but we put in place standards and working with partners to ensure the safest possible products that we can have for use for everyone. So it's definitely a global, and I'll give a shout out to the National Center for Toxicological Research. They do research that supports science-based decision-making here at FDA. So with the focus on foods, I'll give you a high-level overview of CFSAN. I've highlighted the different offices in different colors. So under the Office of the Center Director, we have 3 offices that are involved in Office of Executive Programs, Management, and Regulatory Policy. They do everything from, they help keep track of everything from congressional inquiries to the budget to our IT systems and just a myriad of other functions. The next set of offices that I've highlighted are where review, regulation, guidance, scientific and regulatory expertise, handling correspondence for industry, working with international standard-setting bodies like the Codex Alimentarius reside. So we have the Office of Analytics and Outreach. We have the Office of Food Safety, Office of Colors and Cosmetics, Office of Food Additive Safety, Office of Nutrition and Food Labeling, and the Office of Dietary Supplement Programs. I think some of what these offices do is evident by their names, that there are separate areas for oversight of different parts of the food supply. Office of Food Safety deals with mostly whole foods like milk and produce safety. My office deals with substances that are added to food. The Office of Dietary Supplement Programs deals with dietary supplements. The next set of offices, Office of Compliance and Coordinated Outbreak Response, is the folks that deal with what's in the food supply currently. So Office of Compliance works very closely with the Office of Regulatory Affairs, coordinating work across the country. The office, and if there's a foodborne illness outbreak, it's what we call CORE, that Office of Coordinated Outbreak and Response and Evaluation, that leads efforts to track and mitigate those outbreaks. And finally, the last two offices, Regulatory Science and Applied Research and Safety Assessment, are the research arms of the center. They do methods development, analytical chemistry, microbiology, and advances in toxicology. So you can see it's a very full program. On the next slide is a little visual of the kinds of things that are done. I mean, I'll be focusing on guidance and regulations, which is what the Office of Food Additive Safety is involved with. There are, recalls, inspections, safety alerts. Those are the kinds of activities that involve what we call post-market, things that are in the marketplace right now. I've already mentioned that there's science and research that is done, and education, training, and also what I'd say outreach sometimes is overlooked. We partner with many groups, provide information to assist our stakeholders, industry, consumers, other regulators. Some very innovative work has been done. Recently, in fact, a curriculum was put together for high school and middle school students and teachers about science and our food supply. And that's actually available on our web. CFSAN has also recently instituted the new era for smarter food safety. The idea is to really move forward, leveraging technology and other tools and approaches to create a safer, more digital, traceable food system, and ultimately to reduce the number of foodborne illnesses. Now, this slide, what I call a food ingredient spectrum, kind of takes you from materials that can be in food at levels much less than even half a part per billion, all the way up to the foods that we eat. And so we have what we call traditionally indirect additives, but that are now called food contact substances. Those materials are what make up packaging or anything that comes into contact with food, like a storage bin or a conveyor belt. It's possible that as food contacts, these materials, substances may migrate into the food, and that is regulated by the agency. Then we have what probably more traditionally what we would call direct additives, things that you're familiar with like flavors, emulsifiers, sweeteners, colors. Macro ingredients, you could think of oils and fibers, and of course then whole foods. So there's a couple of basic points, takeaway points on the next slide that just, kind of are overarching. So I've already said FDA regulates all food and food ingredients, except those that the Department of Agriculture regulates, meat and poultry and other products. The regulatory requirements for a particular product depend on its identity and the use of that ingredient or substance. This is very broad, and the beauty of it is that it gives you flexibility to look at new products as they come on the marketplace and not have to and apply a broad framework for regulation and to look at them. And of course, food and food ingredients must be safe, right? Suitable for eating, safe and wholesome. Everybody agrees with that. You don't see the word benefit here. The benefit is that the food should be safe for consumption, and that's FDA's mandate for foods. So how does FDA do this? On the next slide, I've got a list of some of the tools that we use, that I'm sure you're all familiar with. We have regulations, we have response letters, policy statements, guidance, outreach, education, partnerships with other agencies, and international work. So how do we do this? Well, Congress has enacted legislation to give the agency authority to use these tools and to carry out the functions that I mentioned. And on the next slide, you will see that authority is in the Federal Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act, the FFDCA or FD&C Act. And it gives us the authority to regulate and have oversight for the food supply. It has a lot of definitions for food additives, color additives, prohibited acts, adulteration. It sets up a requirement for pre-market approval for food additives and color additives and establishes formal rulemaking procedures. Out of that legislation and the history that went with it and regulations that followed, we have a standard of review and a standard for safety. So I'm going to go through some of this in a little more detail. I really love this definition for food. Articles used for food or drink for man or other animals. Chewing gum, articles used for components of any such article. So I've highlighted the fact that food includes food for man or other animals. So we regulate the food that human beings eat and food that livestock, companion animals are fed. And I mentioned previously that Center for Veterinary Medicine and their Division of Animal Feeds evaluates food for other animals. And it also says components of any such article, components of the food. So that brings me to the next slide, where we have definitions, more definitions. I don't mean to make people lawyers here by citing all of these sections of the Act, but anyway, just so you know, they're there. So food additive is very broadly defined to capture pretty much everything and anything, any substance, the intended use of which results directly or indirectly in it becoming a component or otherwise affecting the characteristics of any food. And in that definition, it includes sources of radiation, which would be used to irradiate food. That is a very, very broad definition, directly or indirectly. And later on, the FD&C Act was amended to include a definition for food contact substance, which is where the indirectly comes in, which we used to call indirect additives, those materials that are used for packaging and transporting and holding food. So the next slide talks about, okay, here's we went through some definitions. What aren't you supposed to do? What's prohibited? And of course, what's prohibited is that you should not introduce into interstate commerce food that is adulterated or allow food to become adulterated. Adulterated, what a fine word. That means anything that contains poisonous, deleterious, something injurious to health, basically anything unfit for consumption. And so that really is the authority that allows post-market activity for the agency to take action against material in the food supply that really shouldn't be there. The next part says, any food that bears or contains an unapproved food additive or color additive is deemed unsafe and therefore adulterated. So color additives and food additives require pre-market review and approval by FDA in order to be in compliance. Otherwise, you could possibly have put into commerce something that violates the Act. Now, that's also very broad. The definition of a food additive is very broad, but certain exceptions were put into these definitions. And probably the most recognized exception is the generally recognized as safe or GRAS. But there are criteria, and I'm going to spend some time talking about this because I think sometimes it's misunderstood. So the substance is generally recognized among experts qualified by scientific training and experience to evaluate its safety. So generally recognized. This can only be something for which there is information available so that qualified experts can see it. If information that is pivotal to the safety is proprietary, confidential, then it's not GRAS. You do not meet that substance does not meet the criteria. That's the first part. And of course, is adequately shown to be safe under the conditions of its intended use. I think sometimes people mistake GRAS to mean generally safe. I can use this anyway, anytime, anyhow. And that's not safety in terms of how we look at food substances. It's the intended conditions of use. So what's an intended condition of use? Well, how much is it? What is it? How much are you putting into the food? What is it being used for? What foods is it going into? How much is going to be in each food product, so that we can assess, what consumers will be eating and how much. When we do that, what we call an exposure assessment, we are thinking about the entire population, all age groups, health status, and we're talking a lifetime of consumption. So it's a very conservative estimate with a lot of conservatisms built in, because it allows us to make sure that we're trying to cover the entire spectrum that we're dealing with. And so the safety standard, I've talked about safety, is for additives a reasonable certainty that no harm will come from the intended use of an additive. So reasonable certainty is because we cannot guarantee absolute certainty. And also it's a recognition that moving forward, science brings us information that we have to consider as we make these safety decisions. And information can come to us that we may have to reconsider about materials that have been in the market. Things like what people thought about salt or partially hydrogenated oils, which over the years we've had information that says, well, maybe we need to look at those things again and think about how to recommend people to use those or not to use them at all in order to promote public health. So let's take a look on the next slide, how the contrast between food additives and GRAS ingredients. So I've already said food additives are subject to pre-market review and approval by FDA. That requires a petition to be sent to us. Successful food additive petition results in a publication in the Federal Register to promulgate the regulation, which winds up being listed in Title 21 of the Code of Federal Regulations. So that is a pretty involved process. It's open for comment and objection once the Federal Register document publishes. So it's meant to be open for comment to the public and as transparent as we can be. The GRAS ingredients, well, I've just told you, are not necessarily they're not subject to FDA pre-market review and approval. Years ago, there was a program to put GRAS substances listed in the Code of Federal Regulations. In the past 20 years, we have established a GRAS notification program where a notifier sends us a dossier explaining how an ingredient meets the standard for GRAS status. So it must have publicly available information and sufficient safety data to support the use that is proposed. FDA responds to a GRAS notice by letter that gets posted on its web page. So you might say, well, how do I determine what my ingredient, what category it falls into? And on the next slide, here's a little illustration, and it's the common knowledge element that distinguishes GRAS uses from food additive uses. So in that first box, technical elements, really the safety data, the most important thing. Where is that information held is the question. But first thing is, do you have adequate information to support the intended use of the substance? If upon review we think it's not adequate, well, you better go and get some new data and see if it's still supportable. If it is found that the information and data that you provide support the intended use for safe use, we come down to the common knowledge element. Are the data and information generally available and generally accepted by experts? If that information is confidential, if it's proprietary, then you fail that element. You have to go into the food additive box. If that information meets that criteria, then we can say that you've obtained GRAS status. So one thing is true, that you can come in and talk to Office of Food Additive Safety. If you have any questions about these things, we're always open to discussion, and we encourage developers and industry to come into us early for these types of discussions. And I want to point out that there are other categories that the law says designates as not falling under the food additive definition. So on the next slide, I've just got another list. Color additives, if you could go to the next slide, yeah. Color additives, which are reviewed in my office of Food Additive Safety, are in a separate part of the law. There's a separate definition. These color additives also do not have in the definition any exemption for GRAS or GRAS-like status. So for a color additive, you need to come in with a petition to the agency to promulgate a regulation for its use. Dietary ingredients and dietary supplements. The Office of Dietary Supplement Programs is the office that deals with dietary ingredients and supplements. Pre-market notification is required for a new dietary ingredient. I'm not going to say a lot about this, but certainly if you are interested, there's information on our website, and you can contact people in ODSP with questions. Animal drugs and their residues. Well, FDA, through the Center for Veterinary Medicine, reviews those. Pesticide chemicals and pesticide residues, Environmental Protection Agency takes care of. Prior sanctioned ingredients, things approved before 1958, or inherent components of the food, lycopene in a tomato. That's not a food additive. It's what makes up, it's in the tomato. Contaminants not added intentionally. So they can't be food additives. They may have been unintentionally added. Oftentimes they pose problems for the safety of the food. So those are not legal food additives. So now that I've laid out some basic concepts, what's FDA doing with all the kinds of food innovations that are coming forward? We know that innovations in science and technology will continue to generate new ways of making food. This is not a new concept. Innovation has been going on since the Food Additive Amendments Act was put into place 60 years ago, and that innovations will continue, and the science is moving really fast. So we take our longstanding authorities under the law to regulate food and food substances, and our scientific knowledge to look at the safety of the use of those substances. So it's a product-based approach. It's not based on how the substance is made to assess the safety, although how a product is made, how it's manufactured or processed can raise questions that are relevant to safety. So this approach of using longstanding authorities, new scientific knowledge, looking at what products are meant to go into the food supply, gives us a great deal of flexibility and adaptability to a wide variety of new food production technologies. I mean, no one could have looked back, in 1958 to say what kinds of technologies and processing abilities we would have in the year 2021. But things were written in a way so that we could capture the broadest, have the broadest application in different situations. So in terms of, I mentioned that of this product-based approach and how a product is made has relevance to safety. And on the next slide, the agency put out guidance for assessing significant manufacturing and processing changes. So guidance is another tool that FDA has to communicate with stakeholders in the industry. This particular guidance applies to products already in the marketplace. You know, production processes do change, and it's possible that such processes, change in processes could have an impact on safety. And it also applies to new ways of producing food and food substances. So what sorts of changes could actually have an impact on safety? Well, maybe your new production method introduces new constituents, some novel substances, and or novel chemicals that we might need to take a look at. Novel sources, you know, moving maybe from chemical synthesis to fermentation. Other novel and new production methods. Also, this guidance applies to deliberate changes that affect the function of a substance. So you can see in particular, it calls out nanotechnology, but that can be true for any other kind of method that's applied to change the function of an ingredient. So this isn't new. On the next slide, there are some examples of the kinds of changes that we've seen in production. It's a wide variety of substances,